Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and there's been a couple of articles recently, most recently in the Times, discussing the reasons why Boris Johnson may accept a no-deal Brexit for sticking to his guns on state aid, and why I think this is implausible. Not the idea that he will end up leaving without a deal, but the idea that he would do so for this state aid situation. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, going back to what seems like an eternity now, seems like a long time ago, but in actual fact, it's really just 1.5 years ago. So as I was just beginning to consciously build this channel, I did a video on what might have been some potential benefits to Brexit. Because obviously I was all over the major downsides. Come on, Phil, said the Brexit supporters. At least try to come up with some things that we could do better outside of the EU. Couple of silver linings. So I thought on one case, if we're going to struggle to get skilled people into the country, then the onus will be on putting more investment into our own education, improving skills so that we can raise the skill level of the British workforce. That might have been a silver lining there. Obviously, that's something we could have done inside the EU. It was a political decision not to, but, maybe necessity. But in terms of something that we could actually do better outside of the EU, I said that we could invest heavily in emerging industries. We could actually get on the ground floor on some things that other countries are being a bit slow at and become world leaders again in some tech. And there's plenty out there, plenty of emergent technology that we could really go at and steal a march on everyone else. Now, would that make all the downsides worthwhile to Brexit? Is that an overall net benefit? No, of course not. But it was something that you could argue it's easier to do a thing outside of the EU than within it from a selfish point of view. Now, what I would say about that, so the reason for this is state aid rules. You can't just endlessly pump money into, say, British-based companies. If there are more competitive ways of getting that service, you'd have to throw the tender out, and that would mean other EU companies would have to take part. So if you want to build up an industry and you want to have complete control over the project, then obviously that is not compatible with following rules set by a wider umbrella organisation like the EU. It's the level playing field. So you would have to involve companies from other EU countries. So it would end up, you would be driving something that would become an EU-wide industry. That would be what would happen. Now, to me, that's not a bad thing and for humanity, it's positively a good thing. Inside the EU, we could have been the driver for new industries that would have catapulted us into the future. The argument for doing so outside of the EU is, like I say, it's entirely selfish, because what it means is we could ensure that the UK and only UK-based companies would benefit from this driver. And what has brought this to my mind again is I've seen this very thing being discussed, first of all, in the Financial Times, about a week ago, a few days ago, and then much more recently, the Times. Now, in the Times, the author of the piece, who's involved in the Spectator, I think deputy editor of the Spectator or something. Now, they are arguing that Boris Johnson is so determined to build this great new industrial hub in Britain that he will accept a no deal rather than agree to the EU state aid rules. That's the narrative they're trying to go with. Now, coming back to when I was talking about this, well over a year ago now, my opposition to this potential is centred on a few things. Not that I'm opposed to Britain, investing heavily in this emergent technology. That would be great. The reason why I don't think it would happen is the way to say this is, one, the Conservatives march to the beat of the drum struck by their media and their donors. These are not people who make money from new tech. They get their money from the established economy. There's no benefit for them in these new industries. We could see this when the Conservatives first came to power. It was one of the first things they did is they gave tax incentives to the oil companies, and they removed the tax incentives, the subsidies to renewable energy companies. You know, the newer tech. The second thing is I've seen absolutely zero sign that Boris Johnson is prioritising this so-called tech golden age. Quite the reverse, in fact. His continuation of the hostile environment immigration policy means that the talent that we need to be able to attract in order to build this brave new world is actually leaving. 3, the EU haven't actually insisted that we adopt their state aid rules. There needs to be some accord. But what they stated was their starting negotiating position. We said, no, we're not happy with that. And then they said, OK, then what's your idea? And we didn't give them one. So we haven't produced a counter proposal. And then the fourth thing, then there's the leader in all this. So when I first talked about this, that was Theresa May. We weren't talking about Boris Johnson then. Theresa May was the Prime Minister. Now, I didn't really believe this because, one, she didn't want to leave the EU. And she was not basing her Brexit path on any grand ambition or what was best for the country. She was basing it purely on trying to avoid a split in the Conservative Party. That was it. Then we had Boris Johnson. Now, he also doesn't have this grand Brexit ambition either, because to suggest otherwise, to suggest that he is working towards this grand plan, now, that could make sense if he had been a strong advocate of leaving the EU for years, and he'd been talking about this great technological future for years. If we had a Conservative Brexiteer Prime Minister with that background, I could buy it. I could believe it. We don't. He wasn't. He argued for remaining for many years, said it would be madness to leave the single market, madness to leave the EU in general. Just before the Brexit campaign kicked off, he wrote 2 articles, very famously. One was arguing for staying in the EU, one was for leaving it. Now, the idea was not to publish both, it was to decide which one he wanted to go with and then publish that one. He opted for leaving because he felt it would be best for his political career. He is a political opportunist, he is not a political architect. If Boris Johnson was genuinely intent on building his tech empire, he would have instructed his officials to get a deal that protected his plans for that. He'd have said, look, this is what I want. You arrange a deal that allows me to have this thing, and we'll go from there. He could have done that. He didn't do that. Obviously that would be politically difficult given that he's adopted such a hard Brexit attitude. Again, it's what he had to do to become Prime Minister. But as part of that, he ended up purging the parliamentary party of the very MPs who actually could have helped him in favour of those who just insist on wrecking our economy for their own personal gain. And it really confuses me. Every time I see another report, and there's not been loads of them, but there has been the odd one trickling through, that Boris Johnson is only refusing to negotiate because of the state aid position, because it's bollocks. If Boris Johnson would accept the general framework of the deal that he negotiated last year and just has an issue with the state aid aspect, he could have just spent this year negotiating that point furiously. Yes, we're okay with this, we're okay. No, we need you to move a little bit on that. There were various issues they would have needed the EU to move on, okay. But the state aid thing, we need to really hammer this out. There's been no discussion. We've refused to discuss it. We've refused to come up with a proposal of our own. And then the idea that we will, in the words of this author, weather the storm of a no deal for a few months. Now, the author, I will hasten to add, does not believe that this is credible, just that this is what Boris Johnson believes. The idea that we can weather the storm of a no deal Brexit for a few months, then go back to talks, that is also vaguely crazy to me. I mean, I am reluctant to automatically dismiss an argument that seems to have been thought through, just in case I'm missing something. But look at the facts. So first of all, we are not prepared for a no-deal Brexit. It will be a calamity. We know that. That's clear. 2, that calamity will be picked up by Starmer's Labour. Yes, Labour are being extremely quiet on Brexit right now. Really, really quiet. I've discussed the benefits of that before, but at some point they're going to need to pick it up. And in fact, you would think they will want to pick it up. At the moment, it's a very divisive topic in both the Labour Party and more especially the wider public, where it's much more evenly split. Much better to keep poking at COVID and the general incompetence of the government, because that is something that unites the Labour Party and unites the public against the Conservatives. So obviously do that. But there will come a point, I wouldn't like to guess, but if I had to guess, I would say at the end of October, when Starmer will unleash himself on Brexit, just as he did when he was the shadow Brexit secretary under Corbyn. Weathering the storm for a few months, the government's own report talks about riots within 2 weeks of a no-deal Brexit. In the reasonable worst-case scenario, soldiers on the streets, it talks about. Rationing. Weather the storm, my arse. How are they going to weather that storm? Boris Johnson is barely clinging on to power as it is. The idea he could survive even a few months of a no-deal Brexit seems insane to me. And then there's all this talk about restarting the talks. I mean, okay, the EU want us to adopt their state aid rules. They are willing to compromise, they've made that clear, but their rules will always be their default position. Now, if we are being battered by a no-deal Brexit storm for a few months, and then we go back and seek to restart the talks, are we seriously going to believe that the EU will go, of course, old chap, of course we're absolutely willing to water down loads of our demands as well while we're at it? What? And the end of the article, I'm going to have to quote this because I could hardly believe it. It says, he sometimes quips, referring to Boris Johnson, he sometimes quips that only 3 people in government agree with me on the whole question of how ambitious or purist to be on Brexit. But he is convinced of his position. Unless the EU moves further on state aid, he won't do the deal. Now let's just consider 2 key points in that. One about only 3 people in government agree with me. So what he's basically saying is he seems proud of the fact that he is in a small minority when it comes to a no-deal Brexit. That suggests that he will not have the political support to navigate through that metaphorical storm. They will abandon him in short order. 2, unless the EU moves further on state aid, I mean, where are they supposed to move to? Because the way a negotiation works is you have one side that go, this is our proposal. The other side says, no, this is our proposal. And then what you do is you discuss the common ground and you eventually move to a position that is between the two. It's not necessarily directly between the two. It may be nearer one side or the other. You know, the stronger side, you'd expect it to be nearer their side. But it will be between the two somewhere. Obviously, each side wants to move as little as possible. And it can take time. The final agreed position, you know, like I said, might be nearer one side than the other, but it will be between the two positions. But here's the problem. The UK haven't got a position. The author of this article says that in the article. It acknowledges that we do not have a position. So if we do not have a position and the EU do, where are they supposed to move to? In which direction are they supposed to move? Because we're not giving them a marker. We're not waving it. We're over here. Can you move a bit closer? We can hear you then. Absolute maddening to hear bollocks arguments like this. And what makes it even more maddening to me is that it might be true. That is to say, Boris Johnson may well be waiting for the EU to move on state aid, even though he hasn't given them a marker to move towards. And it may also be true that he is willing to go through with no deal because of this one issue. That's possible. And if he does, he may think that he's sticking to his guns on state aid. But that won't actually be the case. Because for all he knows, if he'd have presented a proposal, the EU may have been able to negotiate a position that gave both sides what they wanted, and then the rest of it could have fallen into place. He could have got what he wanted, if that's what he wants. I don't believe it, but if it is. But the great Muppet hasn't shared what he wants with the EU. This is what I've been raving at the rest of the year, the whole year. We haven't actually told the EU what it is we really want. We haven't been giving them our proposals. Not that this was even the stupid Brexit speculation I read about in the press. This was at least interesting. The Telegraph had an absolute peach about how we could get the EU to, well, even tried to suggest it was in the EU's interest to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. Oh, we could both do really well out of this. But the way they suggested that we get the EU to agree to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement was, get this, threatening them with a trade war. Okay, good luck with that. Actually, didn't Michelle Barnier say that this week? But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.